Welcome, everybody, to the Attract and Stand Out podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Hawley, and I am so excited for today's guest. I have with me Kezia Hall. She is a qualified holistic nutritionist with her postgraduate in Nutritional Science and Practice. She works primarily with women who are fed up of feeling bloated and tired. They're not happy with their weight, and they're tired of constant digestive issues and knowing what to eat. She creates nutritional and lifestyle plans that help them fix their digestion, I can't talk, so that they can feel good in their clothes and get back to living their lives. She lives in Scotland, but works with clients all over the world and loves her daily dose of dark chocolate, which is totally in alignment with me. Dark chocolate is probably my favorite treat as well. So welcome to the podcast, Kezia.
Yay, thanks for having me. It's so fun that we can do this and just chat from other sides of the world.
From Scotland to California. I love that we are able to have these conversations. When I started my business back in 2007, I only knew people in Las Vegas, where I lived at the time, because it was we didn't have we had an internet, but it wasn't anywhere near what it is today. So I love that as our businesses have become more and more virtual, that we're able to make these amazing connections and get to know each other better from everywhere.
Yeah, it's super fun. Sometimes technology is frustrating, but most of the time it's super cool.
Yes, absolutely. We were having tech difficulties right before we stopped on. And it's like that love-hate relationship with technology, right? Like it either works great and we love it, or it's our worst enemy. It's our nemesis.
Yeah, especially when you work primarily online, which both of us do.
Yes.
You can just be like, and you're not, I don't know, you're not like a software developer or technician in that regard. You can sometimes be like, why isn't my webinar working? I don't know. But
what is happening? What do I do? Well, I'm so excited to have you on here today, Kezia, because I absolutely love and admire the work that you do. I think it's so important that we take care of ourselves. And I'll be completely honest before we dive into this conversation. I love sugar. I have the biggest sweet tooth in the world, and I have to be super cautious and careful and be diligent, I guess would be the right word, to make sure that when I walk into the kitchen, especially late in the evenings, if I come back downstairs for any reason, like that's when my sweet tooth is usually on, and I will find something in the house that I feel like I need in the moment, and I definitely don't need. But so I'm excited for today's conversation and just to kind of talk through you and your business and how you came on this journey. So let's kind of start there. So tell us first, what is your business? Let's start with that, and then we'll kind of dive into how you got into this field.
Yeah. And with the sugar, you are so not alone in that, Darlene. I would say I'm a recovering sugar addict completely. I'd be one of those people that would just be like, I don't know, make like sandwiches with biscuits inside, just one of those kind of people, and would have insane sugar cravings. And it's totally normal. And with lots of things, actually, stuff around food cravings and health and all of that sort of stuff. It's a lot of just kind of figuring out why. Actually, I feel like that if I was to summarize what I do with clients, it's just asking a lot of kind of the right questions. But in terms of how I came about to do this, it definitely wasn't. Now that I'm doing the work that I do, it makes perfect sense. So I'm a holistic nutritionist. So my postgraduate was in nutritional science and clinical practice, and I have a kind of functional medicine foundation, which basically just means a very holistic approach to how I work with clients, do functional lab testing, those kinds of things. And I work with clients all around the world. So even before COVID, I was primarily using and had an online business as opposed to an in-person one. But my undergraduate degree was in fine arts. So I actually was a practicing artist, like a professional, fine artist for about 5 or 6 years, which lots of people are like, how do you get from that to chatting to people about like their hormones and poop all the time? I'm like, right. Well, it is a bit of a leap. But the main reason I kind of came through this journey, and it's quite a common reason in this space, is just from my own health issues. Essentially, I've struggled with various health issues, nothing like really severe or really complex or really life-threatening, but things that were really depleting my quality of life, and ever since I was a child. So from going to pediatricians all the time as a child and just having them look at me and be like, well, I don't know, here's some more antibiotics. I was very much a child of the antibiotic era. Now doctors are a little bit more selective about how they give antibiotics. When I was little, they were not. It was just a lot of banana flavored, for some reason, antibiotics. And the only way my mum would get me to take them, because they tasted gross, is by giving me loads of sweets. So I would take my antibiotics and then I'd get to pick sweets from the sweetie jar, which looking back now as a holistic nutritionist, I'm like, that's hilarious. So anyway, so ever since a child, a lot of health issues, and then into adulthood, early adulthood. And I just realized how much it was affecting the things I wanted to do, as late teens, early 20s, I wanted to travel and live in different countries, but I struggled so much with chronic bowel issues, diarrhea, IBS. I was diagnosed depressed by the time I was 19. I had a really disordered approach to eating food. My energy was really poor for someone, of that age where most people are like going out and getting up and going to uni. I was like, no, I need my full 10 hours of sleep. And I just realized that, say, even traveling, this is probably the clearest example. I knew I wanted to travel to places like Cambodia. My brother lived in South Africa. But I was like, if my stomach can't handle being in the UK, I am not going to be able to handle Cambodia, India, all these places that I wanted to get. It was just a very, clear reality. And that's kind of how I started to just really slowly look into the world of health, and specifically kind of more holistic approaches, and really starting first with what I was eating. I was aware that at the time that milk gave me eczema when I was a baby, because my mum used to tell us that she had to restrict our cow's milk intake because we would just get covered in eczema. So I had that was my foundational thought, if that makes sense, of maybe dairy doesn't do me good. And really slowly I just started to look at the food I was eating, the way I was thinking, the stuff that was going in my body and on my body. And eventually I just really shifted those things, got rid of the IBS and the depression and the just all the horrible things, the crazy periods and hormones, and just really learn about the power I had when it came to my health, and when it came to how I felt. That feeling I had every day when I woke up wasn't like a gamble, if that makes sense. It wasn't something that was like, maybe I'll feel good today, maybe I'll feel terrible. I could actually have a lot more ownership and a lot more power over that than I realized. And then once I got to that point and people were, asking me lots of questions, doing lots of things, I actually started a blog, and slowly kind of did some more health coaching. That's kind of where I began. So looking more at mindset and coaching people through habit change. And then I just realized I'm really, really geeky, and I just wanted to know more of the biochemistry and run labs with people. And that's why I then went back to uni for a couple of years to get a bit geekier, essentially.
I love it. Yeah, but I love that you said that you realize you have the power to own your health and to make those choices, because so much of, I think, of what keeps us healthy today is we have to be cautious. We have to make choices for ourselves. We have to know which foods affect us, what bothers us, what doesn't. And we have to be the deciding factor, right? You can go to the doctors and be told all day long, this is bad for you and you shouldn't, eczema comes possibly for you from drinking milk, those things, we know that. But then we also have to make that conscious decision to actually not put that into our body and be strong-willed enough to go through that.
Yeah, so it's not just the nutritional science, whilst that's really important, and it's not just the quantitative data of lab results and biomarkers that come up in blood tests. Yes, that's all really important, but you also have to look at the habit change and the thinking and the beliefs so I do really think in order to bring change effectively and holistically, you do need those kind of two streams, which I actually often think is lacking in my industry. People are either totally just focused on mindset or just focused on the nutritional science and those quantitative elements. Whereas I think the most change happens when you fuse both of them together. And that's been my experience with clients anyway.
Yeah. So how did you come to realize that you had to fuse those together? And what types of things do you do with your clients to make sure that you kind of fuse those two pieces? Because I know from what I see, and just personally, a lot of times, you know what to do and you know how to do it, but sometimes actually committing to it and staying focused on it can be a challenge.
Yeah, no, it can be a challenge. And I think the way I tend to approach it is, I suppose, when I first start working with someone, or even if I'm just having a conversation with someone and trying to help them, I really try to understand, like, it's kind of like peeling back the layers or looking, or I often use the analogy sometimes with clients as like a fruit tree. So people will maybe say, you mentioned with your sugar, say maybe, and I'll probably exaggerate this, say you're like, Kezia, I just eat way too much sugar. I feel like it's out of control. That's something I'd really like to change. So that's kind of like the fruit of a tree. It's like the apple of a tree. And maybe it's a bit rotten and you don't really want to keep on reproducing that habit. What I often think of it as is you've got to kind of go back. If you want to change the fruit of a tree, you actually need to go back to the roots, dig it up, and replace the tree, essentially. Because otherwise, if you've got an apple tree that's rotten, you're always going to make rotten apples, if that makes sense. And so much of the problem with the health, nutrition, and dieting world is people focus so much on the habit, on the sugar addiction, on the I drink too much wine, I have too much coffee, which is important. But actually, if you want to bring about real change, you've got to kind of work right the way back and go, okay, what is going on at the root here? And what is driving this? So what that means in a more practical sense is really looking at, so let's say, say someone feels like they're drinking too much alcohol, then they know is feeling good for their body and it's not helping them with just their day-to-day life and how they want to feel. Then actually what you want to look back is and look at why. And for some people, the why might be really a lot to do with past experiences, stress, relaxation, or the need for relaxation. But for another person, it might be because their blood sugar is really off and drinking alcohol is kind of a form of sugar. And it actually really helps to bring about a bit of balance to their blood sugar. There might be some genetic factors that make it, that make them detoxing alcohol more difficult. So it really can be, if you can go back to the why and ask good questions, gather enough data, both your qualitative, so meaning feelings and these intangible things, as well as your quantitative data. If you can figure out your whys, then that you can then create a plan from that. And the why, I've had some clients where actually a lot of what we talk about is primarily maybe what you call mindset work. And so we use the self-coaching method by Brooke Castillo. We might use tapping, we might use affirmations. I always use meditations with my clients, and we basically use whatever toolkits they feel comfortable with, depending on their own belief system and culture and those kinds of things, to really help them shift their thinking. For another client with maybe the same issues, it's really about, okay, we need to support your liver detox pathways because we think they're impaired. And you think this bad habit is a result of your personality or your personal failings, when actually it's the result of poor biochemistry that we can impact and we can change. And often people are a little bit of a blend of both, especially with more complex kind of health issues going on. But it really is asking good questions, figuring out why, and then focusing on it. And then I really do use different tools depending on what I think a person needs. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned how you use different tools with different people, because each of us are so uniquely wired, right? So whether it's stuff from our past, from childhood, from past traumas, to just our body, how it's made up. So I think it's important that we focus on those things too, because not every single person's going to be the exact same way to probably treat when it comes to our sugar and our body and what we're taking in and how we take care of ourselves. Some of us love to exercise. Some of us love to run. Some of us love to ride bicycles and have Pelotons and all the fun stuff like that. And then there's other people who aren't into that. So it's finding that right balance for you and what's going to work specifically for your individual DNA and body type.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, it's every client I've worked with, and I've worked with hundreds of people now, even if I get 2 clients coming to me with the same goal. So let's say they have hypothyroidism, or they suspect that they do. It can be the same health condition, the same diagnosis, maybe even similar lab results in terms of when you test their thyroid. But the why and the protocol that they may have could be really different depending on that key why, depending on what are the key driving factors and contributing factors to that kind of diagnosis. And that's, I think, where lots of people get in a bit of a pickle, is because through all the Googling and the diet books and all the great information we have out there, it can get very confusing because people then try to fit, it's like square peg round hole, or whatever that phrase is, because it's like, I'm just going to try and jam my body into this paleo diet or into this vegan diet, because I read that it's really good, and my friend's life changed when they became X, Y, and Z, as opposed to being like, okay, what does my body really need? And what's this personalized kind of bespoke way of living and eating? And that's where you get the biggest shifts and results as well.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because I feel like that's the same even in my industry as a business coach. Like, just because somebody else is doing some kind of marketing strategy or they're doing something that works for them, it doesn't mean that that's what's going to work for you, right? So that can transpire into so many different industries. Like, just because you see somebody else doing something doesn't mean that's going to work for you. And I've had that experience too with friends. Like, sometimes they're like, oh, I'm eating this new eating plan, or I'm doing this, or I'm exercising this way, and you should try it. And then I try it and I'm like, well, it doesn't really work for me, or I don't love doing it. Like, it doesn't light me up and it's not fun. Where they're like every day consistent doing it. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm going to stick over here to what I'm doing, stick to yoga, some Pilates, maybe something a little bit lower impact. So I think it's so important. I love that you mentioned that it's really uniquely designed to the individual, and it's not necessarily going to be the same, even if somebody has those same symptoms or the same results, like you said. Like, it can be something different. What is the way that you help identify, like, if somebody does come to you, or two people come to you and they have very similar stuff, like, what are some of the questions you ask or things that you do to identify, like, what that root cause is for them specifically? I'm just curious.
Yeah. I mean, I ask a lot of questions, and I always tell clients in advance, the first kind of initial session I have with someone is longer than a usual consultation that we'd have. And I ask a lot of what I call nosy questions. So there's a couple of different phases. I gather someone's health history. So I go back to, okay, what was the health of your mother from what you know or remember or have access to? Were you breastfed? What was your birth like? What did you eat as a child? Like, literally trying to gather a timeline, essentially, a kind of health history, to see, not just because I'm nosy, but to see, how's your immune system developed? How's your microbiome? What's impacted that? What are some of the key things that have shaped your biochemistry and brought you to this point where you're in front of me as a 39-year-old woman and you've just discovered you have hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's? Like, what are all the contributing factors that have led to that point? So I look back, and then obviously you've got to ask detailed questions about present. So present symptoms. I ask a lot of nosy questions about your poop, your period, your libido, the home that you live in. Are you exposed to any toxic elements, molds, heavy metals, medications, recreational drugs? What are the foods you're eating presently? What stress levels, what kind of experiences have you had in your life? Has there been much trauma or abuse? Have you received counseling or therapy for that? You know, just all the things. What is your dental health like? That's always a question that gets my clients like, what's that got to do with anything? Because I'm like, how's your teeth? And they're like, I came to see you about my thyroid. I'm like, I know, but they're not that far apart. So
it all comes together, right? Because all the pieces are it's like a piece of the puzzle. Together.
Yeah, and you're all one system, one body, one being. And then, so there's that part. I look back, I look presently, and then I also often will ideally run some sort of laboratory testing, or if someone already has results, maybe they've gotten a bunch of test results recently from their doctor, then that can be a really nice aspect of looking at more quantitative data and certain things that you can track along those times. So that tends to be how I ask the questions. And I often do that just through conversation, through lab results, things like food diaries, questionnaires, and to be honest, just being willing to go there with the questions like, so how often do you poop? What is your period like? How much do you want to have sex or not have sex? Do you, like, all the questions some people don't want to ask? I tend to be quite happy to ask them in the right context. With
I love that you say you're nosy, like you ask nosy questions, because I do nosy questions too, I guess, with my business, because I want to dig in as deep as possible and find out all the things so that we can see what's worked, what hasn't worked, like, and get down to like kind of the root of it. So I like the word nosy, and I also like the word curious. I'm a balance between curious and nosy.
Yeah, I would say I'm the same as well. I always describe that way to my clients. And obviously people share as much or as little as they feel comfortable with. But again, you can figure out, if you have good questions, as well as good knowledge or strategy or training or whatever, then often you can then get to that root or that why much quicker. And it's just, and also having that intuitive element as well of just being like, you know, sometimes I won't ask clients about their teeth because I already know it's not an issue. And for other clients, I might ask, okay, is, you know, just you get that kind of gut feeling and intuition or whatever you want to call it as well, which I do think is good to pay attention to as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I listen to my gut all the time because that's usually, you can just feel it in your body. Like if
Yeah,
you're
it's
asking
usually
the right
right.
question, or if you're taking the right steps or doing the right thing for you, like that's where your intuition comes in and is so valuable.
Yeah, so valuable.
So since you've started your business, what has been some of the most successful things that have happened to you?
Oh, that's a great question. Since starting a business, I found it actually really, I've struggled to figure out what success is for me, if that makes sense, and how to quantify it. But over the years, so I've been doing this in some shape or form now for about 5 years. And so I think probably what still, even to this day, I feel like is the most successful thing. I'm really driven in my business with the idea of impact and kind of quite a mission oriented thing. Yes, I'm in business to make money and for profit and those kinds of things, but I'm also mainly really driven by this idea of I really want to change our relationships with our bodies and kind of change this culture that we have created around healthcare, food, our bodies, which actually is a lot of drama and is quite negative and detrimental to not just our health, but actually future generations. That, you know, how we manage our bodies impacts the genes that we pass on to our kids, which is so forth and so forth. So my biggest thing I probably am most proud of is just the amount of people that I've helped in terms of just my like testimonials and track record, and actually just the people that I impact. So I run a podcast, and it's not like, you know, it's not like Tim Ferriss levels of what, 1 million downloads a week or something. But when I look at it, I'm like, oh, I've like impacted, I don't know, 40,000 people this year just from my podcast. Like, that's amazing. Which, considering it's just me in Scotland, like, it's not like I'm a famous person. Do you know, like, I just am doing the best I can. I'm kind of imperfectly just plodding along, constantly learning, constantly growing.
Yeah.
And that feels like on days when I'm like, oh, this is rubbish, I shouldn't do this, I should just go back to whatever, my old job, which doesn't exist anymore, then I'm like, oh, actually, isn't this amazing? So I think that's probably what I'm most proud of. Or when like the biggest success sometimes is those really little stories that I get when a client emailed me this week, and we worked together last year for various health reasons, primarily because she was wanting to get pregnant, but there was just various issues to do with age and fertility and those kinds of things with her and her partner. So we worked together for a while just to help get her body ready. And then she emailed me just this week and it's like, oh, I've just had my 12-week scan. Everything's well and happy. And that's the stuff that I'm like, oh, yes.
Yes.
That feels like what I've now, it's taken me a long time to figure out, but it's those stories and the impact that feels like success to me. But that's a great question.
I love that that's success for you, because it's so in line with how I run my business as well, because it's all about making an impact in the world and helping other people. And you said you have 40,000 downloads, and it's not as big as like some of the big, huge podcasters, but I think it's so special that you've impacted like 40,000 people. And those are the exact people that you're supposed to be making an impact with. You don't have to like as long as you're helping even one person, I feel like you're doing justice in the world and you're showing up and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you don't have to be like one of these, you know, huge influencers. Like, yeah, it might be cool, but
yeah, but I wouldn't want to be. I just think I look at it. There's a lot of pressure. You've got to stay fit. Like, oh, you need like a PR team, and oh, it's just a lot. I'm quite happy.
Yeah,
I'm happy helping the women and some men that I help.
yeah. And the work that you do, like, yeah, you can scale it to help, you know, if you had a program where you had like 3,000 people come through one program, but just like think of like the less personalization that you would miss out on. Like, I know you love like connecting with people and making an impact and like knowing them specifically. Like, I love that piece with my business as well, is just having the chance to get to know people one-on-one. And if you're Marie Forleo, which would be super cool and all, but she doesn't know any of her students in her program. She doesn't have that one-to-one connection piece, which I know is so important to us too, and making that impact directly with people.
And I did used to try, and when I started my business, I'm quite a strategic thinker. So I was aware that if I just do one-on-one, I can't really scale that, blah, blah, blah. That was my thinking. So I did have like a membership and group programs and those kind of things, which I enjoyed running. But over the years, I've realized that right now, anyway, and this might change, my sweet spot is, and what I really enjoy is knowing people's names. And I want to know all that information about you. I want to know the root cause so that I can really help. And that it's taken a bit of time, to be fair, to figure that out for myself of, you know what, I'd rather just work with like 10, 15 clients at one time, go really deep, make some like life-changing, phenomenal results, as opposed to 1,500, where, yeah, we would totally see change. But right now, it feels right for me to just have that depth of people. And actually, I've never been a big numbers person. I've never wanted 100 friends. I'm one of those people that's like, I'd like, 3 or 4 really good friends that you go super deep with straight away, not just like a whole clique of people that are nice, if that makes sense.
Like
so
surface level friends versus like intimate conversations where you can tell everything and have somebody that you can confide in. So I love that. It's so powerful, I feel like, too, when you can make those types of relationships and make that kind of change with your clients, to really get to know them inside and out, especially in your industry. Like, all the details.
All the things.
I don't ask some of those questions.
Yeah, no, I literally have sometimes been sent pictures of people's poop with permission. Like, I have said to them, but not many jobs you get that in your Gmail. You're just like, oh, then Monday morning, there we go.
And we're starting off. It's going to be a great week. I love it. Yeah, no, and I love just your definition of success, making an impact and helping people make powerful changes inside themselves. Pretty cool.
Yeah. So
with your business then, what have you found to be some of the challenges that really have come along with just starting a business? A lot of my listeners are, they have businesses already, or they're thinking about starting businesses. And I like to give them kind of some of the behind the scene type stuff as well of business owners, for kind of what are some of those obstacles or challenges that have come up for you, and how did you overcome them? Like, what were some of the steps you took?
Yeah, no, there's been a lot. I'm like, which ones do I pick?
Right.
I definitely have found that running a business was way harder than I expected it to be, in a completely different way than I expected it to be, if that makes sense. So I think probably my biggest challenges have been twofold. I think as annoying as it can be to say, I think a lot of it has been mindset and thinking and beliefs, which if you'd said that to me 5 years ago, I would have been like, no, like get over it. Like, just do the work and you'll build a business. Like, building a business is about working hard. And I do think you do, at certain stages in your business, you do need to maybe work a bit harder than you were expecting, but it comes in kind of seasons and cycles, I think. But I have really discovered and then my biggest challenge has actually just been accepting the fact that, yes, I need to work hard and have the right strategy, but I also need to be willing to do that uncomfortable work on how I think, on my self-worth, all this stuff that I just was not interested in doing. I was just like, I want to create a business so it can be my job. I'm not interested in a, spiritual path, as it were. But the more that I've done it, that has been a constant challenge, but also a constant reward because as I've dove into that, looked at the way I think and relationship with money and life and all of that sort of stuff, it's just been phenomenal. But it has been challenging. Like, even in this past year, some stuff coming up in my personal life and just being like, I just need to go through this. And it had nothing to do with my business per se, but I have seen the knock-on effect of my business by just dealing with some historic stuff that had gone on and finally getting some support around that. And I just realizing how much I think and how much, like, that holistic approach, my business is affected by everything. It's affected by my past. It's affected by my present. It's affected by how much sleep I have. It's affected by how much connection I get with other people in the week, because if I feel lonely and sad, I don't perform that well in my business. All of these things. And I think really when I started my business, I knew there was this holistic aspect to the way I ate and to health. But through running my business, a challenge has been really allowing that holistic perspective to move through not just my business, but through every aspect of my life, and really look at it from that wholehearted perspective. So I think that has been a challenge, and is consistently a challenge. It's gotten lots better probably in the last 18 months, because I've really just been like, right, brain, let's get some help, let's get some support, let's do some changing the way that I'm thinking. And that's been really helpful. So that's definitely been one challenge. And then I think the other challenge with hindsight is actually, if I was to do it again, I would actually get help, work with a business coach, work with someone much earlier on. And I remember I did a group program near the start, which wasn't unhelpful, but I really needed actually that one-to-one. I think if I'd had that some one-to-one support, I think it would have made a big difference. Because I feel like I spent the good 3 or 4 years of my business figuring out a business model that worked, and trying to make certain business models work for me that I thought were good, and then get frustrated for why I wasn't hitting certain revenue marks. Whereas actually, I just needed someone to say to me, if you want this as a goal for your revenue right now, unless you are like some Instagram influencer with 100K followers, where you might be able to convert 1% of them into your membership, if that makes sense, and then you would get, I don't know, 100 people, whatever that maths is, this is the model that's going to help. And that has been so helpful. And that has been a constant challenge. Like you say, it's like with health and eating, I read all the stuff, marketing funnels, tripwires, memberships, group programs, social media marketing, blogging, content marketing, all the things, which is all good. But it was just a lot and very overwhelming. And I was just getting frustrated at the lack of results. So I think those two things have been a big struggle, and just keeping on going. Like, I know some people see acceleration and growth in their businesses really quickly, and they stop their jobs, and then within 6 months they hit their revenue goals or whatever. But that's not been my experience. It's actually been a real challenge of, okay, do I believe in this? Do I believe in myself? And yes, okay, I'm going to keep on going. This won't work if I give up. So the one way I can make sure that this is going to work is by not giving in and not giving up. And yes, then looking at the financial, practical, you need plans and, budgets in place and those kinds of things. So yeah, the amount of determination required to just stay in the game, if that makes sense, has
absolutely
been challenging, but totally worth it. And I remind myself every day that I choose this. No one's forcing me to work for myself. No one's forcing me to run a business. This is 100% what I choose. And so I kind of have chosen those struggles because there must have been a part of me that knew I needed them, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. And I think since I started my business in 2007, which was forever ago, like I've grown so much as just a person because of the journey of entrepreneurship and starting your own business and putting yourself out there and consistently showing up and like asking yourself all those mindset questions that come up, like, am I worthy? Can I do this? Like, is this for me? Should I go back and get that job? Do I want to go back and get the job? Heck no. Like, I want to keep moving forward. But I always wonder, like, if I would have stayed in retail management, like who I would be as a person now, because I don't think I would have done the deep work as an employee of a company like I've been so blessed to have been able to do as an entrepreneur. Like, I feel like every single challenge that comes up as a business owner helps me go deeper as a person, and like the self-development work and like the shifts in my mindset and how I show up in the world have changed dramatically. And I definitely would not be where I'm at today just as Darlene, as me, had I not been on this journey as an entrepreneur for the past 13 years.
100%.
So it's such a cool experience. I feel like as entrepreneurs, like we get to do all of this work for our business. Like we say, like, oh, we're doing it for our business, but I think I benefit more from it like 9 out of 10 times than the business does necessarily. Like, it's who I get to show up and be. And it's a journey that I feel like I'm always going to be on. Like, I feel like I'm always constantly wanting to learn more and better myself and take myself to that next level and push myself to get there. Where when I was in, retail management, corporate America type stuff, like, yeah, there's that desire to improve and get better, but it comes from a different place. It comes from expectations, I feel like, of other people putting on you. Whereas an entrepreneur, we get to put that on ourselves, and there's no cap, there's no ceiling for how far we can go for what we do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it is such a phenomenal journey and process, and it can be like hard and gritty, but it's that great, like Brené Brown talks about that quote about being in the arena. I think being an entrepreneur, especially as a woman, I think feels really like being in the arena still. I think even if I look at my own history, like women in my family haven't earned money a lot, if that makes sense, or never owned money, or never been able to ask for money, or been able to keep money. So there is something, and without getting too weird and wonderful, I do think there's a just some kind of resistance that we feel now as women business owners, because it's like we are asking people for money in exchange for service and dealing with a problem. And that, I feel like there's a part of us that still feels like that's quite a radical and uncomfortable thing to do, because I mean, everyone's family line is different. But that definitely wasn't the case in from what I know of my history, even just in the past couple of, my mom and my grandma and my great grandma. And that, I think I feel, and I've only really understood that more recently, where I'm like, oh, I do feel that this is actually quite radical, what I'm doing, trying to say, I'm worthy of being paid. I've got skills, I've got intelligence, I've got gifts. I can impact the world. I can change things. I can leave a better legacy. I can be a good ancestor to future generations, that I'm more powerful than I could ever realize. So I'm going to take action on that and show up as that and get in the arena with that. That is quite a radical stance, I think, still for a woman to take based on our history.
Yeah, and the generational change that we're creating right now, because we're stepping out and we're stepping up and doing things that definitely the women in my family didn't do. Yeah, it's life changing, and I believe in like the generational stuff, like things from our great grandparents, which we may have never even met, like have impacted us today. So what changes are we going to be able to make for like those future generations of our children is going to be so powerful for how they move forward, and the things that they're going to be able to accomplish with hopefully not as much worry or scarcity or fear mindset stuff behind it, because we've done the work now and how it's going to impact them later.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
So as we kind of start to wrap up our conversation today, I have some fun rapid fire questions I like to ask all my guests, just to kind of get to know you at a different level. So my first question is for you. Who has been the biggest influencer in your life, and why?
Well, it's hard because I'd say my parents. So both
parents.
Yeah, because they're not one person, but they're one unit.
That's one unit.
Even now, they're still one unit. Yes, so yeah, I'd say my parents, for absolute better and for worst, but in the best way, if that makes sense. Yeah. I so needed them to be my parents, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I'm curious if you have a morning routine, and if so, what is it?
Yes, I do. I'm a routine person. And I actually describe it to my son and my husband as like, this is mum's going to sort out her head time. If mum doesn't do this, my head is not in a great place for the rest of the day. So ideally, I mean, this is subject to change to whatever's going on, but ideally I get up in the morning before the rest of my house, which thankfully isn't that early. It's like 6:45. So that's actually quite late for most of the world. I'm not going to get up at 4 a.m. Not for anyone.
Either.
No one. I'm sound asleep. So I get up, I'll have a big glass of water, actually like this, if you're watching, like the size of my head, make some sort of herbal tea. And then for about half an hour, ideally half an hour, sometimes 15 minutes if I don't have time, I will then do a blend of different things. I'll nearly always meditate. And I use different ways and types of meditation depending on just how I feel in the day. So I might journal if I need to get some stuff out, but I don't always journal. I do like an energy practice that's based on what's it called, Eden energy medicine, which is just, it looks very odd, but it's just a series of like thumps, and it's just around the idea of balancing your energy for the day. And I've been doing that the last year, and it's been great. It only takes 5 minutes, and I feel like it's really helped as I've learned more about how much, just from like a science perspective, how much all of our cells and our atoms and electrons are basically just charged with lots of energy. And even from like a medicinal point of view, we tend to ignore that aspect of how much we are literally energetic beings. So anyway, I'll always do that. I'll always meditate. And then I might journal, or I might just do some stretches or move, or put on, if I'm feeling a bit grumpy, I'll put on like a song that I like and just
dance it out.
Yeah. If I've had one of those mornings where I'm like, woe is me.
Yes.
Oh, my life is terrible. I'm just like, get a grip, Kezia. Put some music on, and then I'll just like shake it out. Or I've got a little trampoline. I might just bounce on that. Not talking for hours here, like all within 20, 30 minutes. I will do that. And sometimes if I can take longer, I like to have a little bit longer. But if I don't, I'll do a 5-minute meditation, my 5-minute energy routine, and then in 10 minutes, I can do that. And I can carve that time out in a day. I think we can all find 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Ideally.
So my day starts so much different when I start with that type of morning versus where it's like you come downstairs and the kids want breakfast and like you're in that like hustle, like busy, go, go, go type space. Like that doesn't feel good to me. It doesn't start my day off well. It usually starts it off in like that grumpiness, and it's like an uphill battle all day just to kind of stay in the right zone. So I'm totally with you on keeping the morning kind of in a nice flow, easy routine, like get our energy going. I love that too. So where's your happy spot? If Kezia wants to just relax and like go to her like special place, like what does that look like for you?
For me, that would ideally be Scottish countryside in the mountains. Ideally up a mountain on a sunny day with just miles and miles of mountains, and then the sea, and then some lochs or lakes. And yeah, that with no one else around other than maybe my husband and some food. And getting to that point on the mountain isn't relaxing or all that fun, but I love to get to that point. Pretty hard work, especially if you're dragging up a 2-year-old. But when you're at that point, it is one of my most happy places. Yeah. Or if I can't, in lockdown, obviously not being able to go to the mountains, my bathtub. It's my more local happy place.
Yes. I take usually like 3 to 4 baths a week just to have like a little bit of me time. It's quiet. Nobody else is in there. Nobody needs me for anything for like 20, 30 minutes. It's heavenly. All right. My last question for you. If I could give you a plane ticket to go anywhere in the world right now for you to travel, which I know we can't, but if we could, where would you go?
My first thought is Bali. I've been there before, and I've done a lot of traveling, and I was surprised at how much I liked it, because I didn't want to like it because it sounded so cliche. Like, oh, the nutritionist who loves to go and do yoga at Bali. I was like, what? That sounds such like, say, atypical. But we kind of went there because we were in Indonesia, and anyway, and I really did love it. So I would go back there for like a month, hire a little house, do yoga, cycle past rice fields, try to avoid getting bitten by mosquitoes.
Let's do it. Let's plan it. Kezia, it's been so fun to have you on today. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Where can people connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me at keziahall.com. So that's Kezia and then Hall, Hall, just .com. Or I hang out probably most either on Instagram or I have a free Facebook group as well. So I hang out, I pop in on there a couple of times a week and do workshops and all of that sort of place. So depending on where listeners prefer to be, if you're on Instagram, I'm on Instagram, you can DM me there. If you're a Facebook fan, then I have a Facebook group, and you can just search Kezia Hall in the little search section. And thankfully it's an unusual name, so there's no other groups with that in the name.
Perfect. I feel like it's perfect. And I know you have a free gift for everybody who listens today. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I'll make sure the link is below so they can find it as well.
Yeah. So if you've been listening today and you're like, oh, Kezia, I just feel a bit overwhelmed and confused and not sure where to begin or what's going on, then I have a free online health assessment that you can go and do, where it'll basically tell you a little bit more information about why it is that you feel the way that is and what you can do about it. It gives you a bit of a personalized approach to, okay, this is what could be going on with your health. I think it might be about your hormones. And then here is some foods to eat, some foods to not eat, those kinds of things. And it's a bit of a plan of action. So if you head over to keziahall.com, and I'll send you the link, Darlene, directly to it, but you'll see it just in the menu tab. You can just click on quiz, and then you can get a whole assessment and personalized plan to follow up, all for free.
Perfect. Sounds wonderful.
It is. Loads of people have done it. I made it as kind of just because I thought it would be fun, if that makes sense. I was like, oh, that sounds fun. And then since I launched it, thousands of people have done the thing. I'm like, oh, right, this is actually useful. And it was fun to create.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was actually just looking at quizzes with a client of mine, and I was like, I think I want to put a quiz together now, but I haven't actually sat down and mapped out at all what it would look like. But I do personally love taking quizzes.
Love it.
It totally grabs my attention. I'm like, oh, what's my one client was putting together she has a tea business, and I was like, oh, what's my favorite tea? I was like, oh, this is so fun to click through the buttons and see what my favorite tea is going to be.
Yeah, it's great. It's great for that.
Quizzes that are so fun. Well, Kezia, thank you so much for being on. It's been such a great conversation with you, and I always love hanging out with you anyway. So thanks for coming.
Yay. You're so welcome, Darlene.